And now we are going to have a dialogue between two Ashoka fellows. They are veterans like me, and they created the Elders Council for Social Entrepreneurs. And I would like to give the floor to a dialogue of Andrea Coleman and Chris Underhill. Please.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Very nice to be with you today, and thank you for your kind invitation. And Bill, lovely to be with you as well.
Yes.
So here we are, you see, Ashoka Fellows making our presentation or having our discussion. That's great, isn't it? Good to be with you, Bill, as well. So Andrea, how should we start this? Should we have a little chat together? As if no one else was in the room?
We'd probably better say before we go any further that both Ashoka and Catalyst have been very, very supportive in helping us develop the Elders Council. Without them, we wouldn't be able to be here. So thank you. But thank you, Ricardo, for inviting us. And we're proud to be on this with Bill and with Jeroo and with all of you. So thank you very much for inviting us. We began the Elders Council really because, as Bill says, this is the first wave really of social entrepreneurs, and this first wave now is getting to a point where they're beginning to, or they've already transitioned and have been through succession, an issue and a process that's very challenging for people. So would you say that's a fair summing up, Chris, of where we started?
It is a fair summing up, and I'm delighted to say that our third co-founder, Mel, is also on the call here today. He's with us. So I don't know if you want to give a wave, Mel. There you are. All I can see at the moment is the top of your white head, but I can see you. But I can see you waving there, so that's great. So the three of us, in fact, got together to start this organization a few years ago. And as you rightly say, Andrea, we've had wonderful support from Catalyst 2030 and Jeroo in particular, and the Ashoka team, both in the UK and also in Europe and worldwide as well. So that's been great. Yeah, I think we realized that what was happening was that social entrepreneurs who were baby boomers, to take the point that Ricardo made, that who were baby boomers were coming to the end of a number of different journeys. Obviously, in some cases, some social entrepreneurs die young. That's how it is. And so that was one kind of journey that they came to an end of. But many others were then facing quite difficult transitions and successions. And so what we particularly wanted to focus on, and that's what we do now in our webinars and so on, is we wanted to focus on how the social entrepreneur can make the best succession from perhaps the leadership of their organization to another role, for example, or to go out of the organization and to do something else. And so those transitions have been really exciting. We have found that no size fits all. So that, you can't simply have one solution for everybody. That doesn't work at all. But what we have found is that by being able to share and promote how social entrepreneurs are making these decisions and what they then do next, what we have found is that there are many different options, many different ways in which they carry this out, and that's where we are today. Just to say, I think, Andrea, that some people we have found like to leave the organization completely behind and go and do something else totally different. So one of our members has left his social enterprise behind. He's then gone into being a professor for a while, and then he has now started in a much more spiritual practice. And so that kind of journey is one journey. And then we have a lady in Nigeria, for example, who is a well-known social entrepreneur in that part of the world, northern Nigeria. And when asked, how are you going to fund your retirement? and the word retirement was used provocatively, really, in that case. She said, first of all, Chris, I have no intention of retiring. And secondly, I'm starting a trucking company. So, in other words, she was going to take care of her own finances in her own way, and run an enterprise, basically.
But I think also we found that some people really do want to arrest. I mean, as we know, there's no one on this call that doesn't know that setting up and running a social enterprise it is exhausting. You know, it can take a lot out of people. Yeah. And some people do want to really rest and do something for themselves, spend more time with their grandchildren, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I absolutely take Bill's point about giving, but there are ways of giving without that being an income source. But when we speak about income sources, one of the things we've really learned here in the elders is that it needs time to plan. And that's why we think that having youngers and elders together, we can learn from each other, but it's important to start planning for that transition and succession, not calling it retirement, but just moving on in your journey. But it's an emotional thing. There are a lot of psychological issues, but there are a lot of financial issues. So if it's not planned for early, together with your organization, your board, your staff, with the people that you work so hard to support, it's very hard to find a place where you can either leave with enough money to be able to rest and spend time with your grandchildren or walking or whatever it is you want to do, or start something else. So we think there needs to be a fundamental change in how social enterprises prepare for the leadership moving on and bringing in new leadership at the right time. So we think we've gathered a lot of wisdom, which we want to be able to share with everyone, both from youngers and olders. And I think that there are a lot of issues there's been a lot of pain and suffering with people having to move on in their organizations. We've seen that so many times. So we're just grateful to the community for listening to what we have to say from the Elders Council. And we want everybody who's over 55 to become a member, but also we welcome youngers. We really want to have that dialogue between youngers and olders.
Let me ask you a question, Andrea. Have you retired?
No.
Well, I would like to interrupt, because I love this provocation, if I may say so. I know the idea of retirement, it's a horror thing for me. I mean, I'm scared of this word, and somehow I saw it. You, Chris, and you, Andrea, you highlighted in your website that you both hate the word retire. So let's talk about that.
we
Self-help group.
I suppose in a way, Ricardo, I see it in a way more as not becoming irrelevant, or not being relevant, or not being part of the world anymore. And that's okay for some people, but I think for so many of us that we want to be relevant, we want to be part of the world. And as Bill says, we want to be able to continue to give. And I think that is really the fundamental point from my perspective.
And in my case, Andrea, and indeed Ricardo, I left Basic Needs, which was one of the organizations that I was associated with, and having founded it in the field of mental health. I left that in 2016 and left it in good heart, and it's now a number of different organizations around the world. So it's gone its own way in a very good way. And I created a business in the field of mentoring. And so I sit here in this very comfortable office and mentor people, and they sometimes come here, or I go to them through Zoom. and that works well. And then I also do some voluntary work. One of them is our Elders Council work that we do together, Andrea, with Mel. And then the other one is working with Jeroo and her team and with others, so as to create the collaboration called the Mental Health Collaboration of Catalyst 2030. So we have 50 or plus organizations now in the collaboration. And that's another piece of volunteer work. And then the rest of my time is spent as a granddad. I have 6 grandchildren. And I told the story the other day of Florence, who was talking to me, and she asked me to play a game with her. I think I've shared this one with you, Andrea, already. And she left the room to find the game, a board game. And she came back sometime later. She looked at me over the board game like this, her eyes looking at me. And she said, Granddad, I think this is a game that's simple enough for you. And so, you know, you get joy out of that, don't you? And so I think it's important while it's possible to have a mixed life of income generation, of doing good, and of volunteering where possible. I think that's a sort of nice mix for me anyway.
Yes.
One of the things that I would like to, if you allow me, one of the things that it's important to highlight is that we social entrepreneurs, we have a different perspective from the, you know, if I can say so, normal people, you know, because we are involved with NGOs, causes, and things like that. Mm-hmm. But somehow I am also a corporation consultant. And what I see now is there is an urge among baby boomers to make a new perspective for their life when they are going to retire. I mean, there is a feeling of frustration with the retirement because, you know, they cannot have a meaningful work. They become disconnected from, you know, from most of friends, from the colleagues, and somehow they became ill. I mean, there is a correlation between, you know, retirement and illness and mental illness, and especially for men. And what I think is there is now in my personal experience with people in the corporations. I'm not talking with, you know, about social entrepreneur. But in the corporations, I think people in their 50 years old are living a sort of a new teenage, a new adolescence. I mean, they look ahead and they understand, they are realizing that they have a bonus of 2 or 3 decades, and the classical model of doing nothing, retirement, doesn't make more sense. So what should we do instead? So what is your perspective for beyond the social entrepreneurship for this challenge of a reinvention of the retirement?
I think that this is something that social entrepreneurs can model, but there's such a set mindset in corporations in the corporate world about earning a lot of money and then retiring and buying a boat or whatever it is, but of course that isn't, as you say, fulfilling, and perhaps we need to come up with some sort of model that shows how much, as Bill says, how much joy and fulfillment can come from giving. So maybe that's something we need to be thinking about. Chris, have you a view?
Yeah, I mean, put very simply, of course, if you take some of the points that Bill was illustrating earlier, you know, in the UK, for example, the number of people over the age of 65, 70, that sort of age, far outnumbers the number of people who are sort of between 0 and 15. And so we have a response. We have the reality of needing to make tax contributions still. We actually have to we have to find work which which is satisfying. So in my case, I'm mentoring, very satisfying, and which also helps to pay the tax bill. And so we have responsibilities in that way as well, Ricardo, which of course is not something that other generations before us have had to think about. In other words, how are we going to continue to make our contribution in that sense? So it's not simply about volunteering, it's also about making a tax contribution. I don't have I understand the point you made, Ricardo, and the challenge that you made. But I think it's probably true for everybody shaping up for post 65 years old retirement. It's probably true to say that we all need to do proper retirement, or sometimes it's called pension planning. Not only because we have to make sure that we are ourselves able to finance a much longer period of retirement, which is in itself an issue, but we also have to be able to understand that those of us who live in countries where there is a welfare state, we have to understand that the welfare state is actually not going to be able to pay for these very long periods of old age, which we have. And so there are going to be some quite important and significant shifts. At the moment, we see in our neighbours, France, neighbours to the UK, France, they're at the moment on the streets demonstrating against the raise of the retirement age from up to 64, whereas now we have our retirement age at around 68, but many of us still continue to work after that.
Just to give you an idea, to add up, in Denmark, for people who are starting to work right now, the retirement age is 74 years old, 74.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I think they're faced with the same issue, Ricardo, which is this mix of having to finance old age and also having to continue to make financial contribution to the country, through taxation and so on. So I think these are all issues which probably people are, certainly 50 years ago just didn't have to face, and so we are having to face those as much as anybody else.
But what I think is encouraging within our own community, in the social enterprise community, is that there are so many of us now focusing on that. And I think together we can start thinking about the issues that you're talking about, Ricardo, the new longevity, the Elders Council, and many other groups of people who are doing that. So I think together we'll come up with something, won't we? That's not beyond us. We usually come up with something, we social entrepreneurs.
Imagination, that's our biggest asset.
Well,
and never giving up's the other one.
Yeah, that's right. Optimism, I would say.
Yeah.
Would you like to complete with something else? I still have some other speaker.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I've probably given you my best shot, except to say thank you so much for inviting us, Ricardo, to speak. I think it's been really nice to share the work that we've done at the Elders Council for Social Entrepreneurs. I'll put our link into the chat in a second. And thank you so much for asking me to make these comments, which I'm very happy.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you. I also think, you can't, as it were, ban the word retirement, but I think it is incumbent upon all of us to think about this as indeed a journey. One of the people who was on one of our webinars said that the moment she said she was leaving her organization to move on to do the succession and transition, she became, as she described it in her organization, a dead duck. And I think if we talk about retirement, it sounds as if you're retiring from life rather than, just moving on to another part of your life. And we don't want anybody, either ourselves, to think of us as dead ducks or for other people to think that way. And I think I think we have to sort of change our attitude to the getting older and designing our own future and enabling ourselves to think in a different way. But thank you so much for inviting us to be.
It's my pleasure, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you, Chris and Andrea, and keep in touch. And now